So today I'm going to talk about how I started a seven-figure million-dollar business for pregnant parents. I'm going to walk you through the highlights of the past few years, what worked, what didn't work, what I wish I knew sooner, and what kind of goals you should set if you want to create a seven-figure million-dollar business. I'm going to cover why I decided to pursue this path and how you can get your first customers. So let's get started. My name is Catherine, and I am the founder of Anja Health. We help pregnant parents freeze stem cells from their umbilical cords and placenta to use for potential future disease treatment. That includes things like there's early research looking at autism, type 1 diabetes. It's being used most frequently for cancers like leukemias and lymphomas, heart disease, liver disease, following a stroke, epilepsy, etc., cerebral palsy. So, this is definitely something to look into if you're currently pregnant. My founder journey began when I founded a small organization called Bridge Strategy. This was basically a consultancy for small businesses. Essentially, I graduated from college and then I was immediately told that my full time job after college was going to have a start date that was pushed because COVID was happening. And the same thing was happening to literally all of my friends. And a lot of us were going to be consultants. I myself was going to be a product design consultant, so I was essentially a product designer, but I was essentially a consultant because we were helping various clients through Publicis Sapient, a tech consultancy. So because a lot of my friends and I were really bored during COVID, we didn't have any jobs, we weren't making money, I decided that it would be a good idea to at least put all of our heads together. We were all going to be consultants anyway. So I thought that we could just be consultants for local small businesses because I was seeing a lot of bored college students that wanted to start making an income and were interested in consulting. And then I was also seeing a lot of posts around businesses that needed help during COVID because they were struggling in 2020. So I decided to put them together and I just started sourcing clients. I did a lot of cold messaging on LinkedIn and reached out to people that I saw were posting about struggling during COVID or that were launching small businesses. And then I started posting on college Facebook groups to source college students that had start dates that were pushed, that were interested in consulting in general. On both sides, there was a lot of demand. And after about a month or so, I stopped soliciting for clients and I stopped soliciting for consultants because I was getting so much inbound that I almost didn't have enough consultants to staff on client projects. And similarly, there were a lot of consultants that were interested in various projects. So yeah, it just became clear that there was a lot of demand on both sides for this kind of consultancy during a really critical time, which was COVID. While I was working on this consultancy, I saw a tweet about a founder co-living space in LA, and I was living at home in LA at the time. And I thought that it might be a good idea to try and live with other founders because I was the only founder that I knew and identified as one because I was running Bridge Strategy, this organization, but I didn't really know where else to take it. I also felt like at a certain point it was kind of in maintenance mode, it was running itself. We were making money from clients, but I didn't want to charge the small businesses too much. And also, some of the consultants were beginning to start full time jobs. So I kind of felt the consultancy winding down, but it was a really good experience for me as a founder because I realized that I really enjoyed managing others and I really enjoyed being able to wheel and deal and source clients, source consultants. And what made me feel most pleased was the positive reviews and the impact that we were having on these small businesses. And on the other side of things, it also made me feel really fulfilled to get really nice messages from consultants saying that we were able to assist with their professional development. So that was really exciting. And I felt like it was time for something new. So when I saw a tweet about a founder co living space in LA, where I was at the time, I decided that it was time to go to that founder co living space to see what I could do next, how I could continue to expand my consultancy. I myself was also beginning to start the full time job. The start date was coming up. So I did. I moved into this founder co living space and I eventually was introduced to Silicon Valley through this house because most of the founders living in this house were venture backed founders. And I had never heard of venture capital before. I had sort of, but I didn't really understand what it meant. I thought that it was in the same realm as investment banking and just some kind of random finance job. I was able to cross register at MIT through my college, Wellesley College. So I had taken some entrepreneurship classes and I had been exposed a little bit to startups, but I didn't really know what any of that meant. And I had always foreseen entrepreneurship in my future, but I thought maybe when I'm 40, I'll start a business. But for now, my 20s and 30s, I saw as a time to explore and live in New York City. That was always part of my dream. And really just be able to better understand my personal goals and just have fun. But when I moved into this founder co living house, I realized that having fun is building something impactful. And I saw that the founders around me were able to really create that impact by being venture backed founders because they were able to source their own resources, be involved in really amazing networks, and be able to accelerate their growth and their goals. So suddenly my whole mindset shifted that your 20s is not just for having fun in sort of the typical 20s Sex in the City way, but your 20s are for having fun in the sense that you can create real impact, use this time to dedicate yourself to a really strong passion and move forward with that passion. So, my third week of living into the founder co-living house, my brother suddenly passed away. My brother had been in and out of the hospital for about a year and a half because he kept getting pneumonia. He would sometimes have seizures. He had a lot of side effects of growing up with cerebral palsy, just a weaker body in general. So, that made him more prone to really negative health affects. So, yeah, he just had a variety of issues that put him in and out of the hospital, but I always kind of figured that he would just always be in and out of the hospital, and I didn't anticipate that it would ever end in something as grave as death. So yeah, it was a real shock to my entire family when my brother passed away, and I living in this founder co-living space when I got the call that my brother passed away, and luckily I wasn't too far from home. It was just a 30-minute drive or so, but I went home for a few days and then we started preparing for my brother's funeral, and at that point I just realized that there really wasn't anything that I wanted to be doing that didn't make me 100% happy because everything that I did in my life day to day just felt like a strain. So I just had to eliminate everything that was exasperating that. And I realized that one of the things that was exasperating my day to day strain was looking forward to doing my product design job. I just didn't like the job. It wasn't meant for me. And I just felt like it wasn't a good fit. So I started thinking about what would make me feel really fulfilled and what would make me not feel strained. And I had just been exposed for the past few weeks to all these founders in this co living space and realized that something that would make me feel really inspired and feel like I'm working towards something meaningful is working on a company that would have been able to help my brother. So, my brother had cerebral palsy and from a near drowning accident when I was younger. And growing up, my mom always looked into treatments for cerebral palsy and found that one of the most promising treatments is a clinical trial at Duke University where children are using stem cells from their very own umbilical cord to be able to treat their cerebral palsy. So they're basically receiving a transfusion of their own cord blood, and the stem cells are very regenerative. So they're able to replace and repair damaged cells in their brain, and they were seeing improved motor and social skill improvements. So my mom tried for a lot of my childhood to find someone else's umbilical cord for my brother to use. And she spent a lot of my childhood trying to educate parents on the fact that you can actually save your baby's own umbilical cord. And if she had done that for me or my brother, we would have been able to use those stem cells. So it was something that I always grew up knowing about. And then when my brother passed away, I thought that being a part of that industry and that process and that whole educational funnel that parents should have when they're pregnant is something that I wanted to be a part of. So before I even quit my job, I thought this is what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to start working towards this idea. And I went back about 2 weeks after my brother passed away to the co founder living space. I started just telling people that I was thinking about working on this company. And then they started giving me tips on how to raise venture capital, what kind of accelerators to look into, and how I can go about getting to a minimum viable product. So my brother passed away in February, and by June, that's what I did. And so I took a pretty extended bereavement leave. And fun fact, most companies only let you have like 4 to 5 days of bereavement leave, which is crazy, of paid bereavement leave. So I took about 8 weeks of bereavement leave and then I quit. And then I just started working on this company because I knew that it was something that would not give me that mental strain. And I'm also really extroverted. So going back to the founder living house made me feel better. And I was lucky that it happened to be a community that was filled with really smart people that could help me move towards my goals. My first step getting off the ground to starting this business was just moving towards A, getting a customer, and B, setting up the infrastructure to be able to serve that customer. So, pretty immediately, I started posting TikToks, and that was my first step because when I was running my consultancy, Bridge Strategy, the first thing that I advised our clients was to get on TikTok. Being on camera isn't second nature to everyone, so most of our clients refused, but I always thought to myself, they're missing out on such a golden opportunity, especially because during COVID, TikTok was blowing up. It wasn't that saturated yet. I knew that this is what businesses had to be doing. So I started making TikToks before our supply chain was even ready. And I was just testing out different messaging and seeing what the response would be like in the comments. And I was pleasantly surprised that the concept of cord blood banking, aka freezing your umbilical cord and placenta stem cells, is something that's so novel that it went viral almost every time I talked about it. So I just kept on making videos about it while I was simultaneously setting up the supply chain. And then at a certain point, about 2 weeks into making content, I felt like the supply chain was almost ready. So then I launched a wait list on Typeform. And I remember the free trial of Typeform allows you to have 100 entries before they shut down the link and they don't permit any more entries. And I put it in my bio thinking that it would take a couple weeks to fill up that 100. But I posted my first video with that waitlist promoting that as the link in my bio. And in 2 hours, we had all 100 spots filled. So I had to immediately pay for Typeform Premium and then relaunch the waitlist and continue soliciting more emails. At that point, I felt like, okay, I think we're ready to get a sale. So the day after that, I launched our official purchase link as the link in my bio rather than a waitlist. And I also emailed the waitlist letting them know that we had launched the actual product. And from there, we decided to just move forward with it. And I handheld our very first customer. They weren't aware that they were our first customer, but I monitored every single thing that happened with that entire process. I personally called after they purchased to make sure that everything went through properly and to let them know what would happen next. And then leading up to their birth, I kept checking in. And then when they told me that their birth was happening, I made sure to monitor it myself every single minute. I placed the pickup myself. I monitored the courier to make sure that they were getting there on time. And I kept calling the courier until they arrived at our lab. And then I called our lab to make sure that they were processing it properly. And then I reached back out to the parent to let them know that everything had happened smoothly. And luckily it did. So that was, yeah, a really amazing day. I remember I was in an elevator at 11 p.m. when I found out that our first customer's stem cells arrived at our lab. That was really exciting because we got our first customer, but it was through TikTok. So our first couple hundred customers were through me making content. And I have always had an affinity for making content. I grew up in LA. I was all like razzle dazzle. I was trying to like model and act when I was younger. So I feel like being able to make content every day about something that's meaningful means a lot to me and came as second nature. So I just introduced you to how I got our first customer, but a lot of people struggle with even just moving forward with getting their first customer and taking the first step. So now we're going to chat about how you can get motivated to take that first step. And really, I think the best piece of advice that I have is Nike's just do it. You just have to do it. It seems scary. A lot of people think that starting a business involves all these crazy things. That was my perception when before my brother passed away. My perception was that in order to start a business, you have to plan all these things, get all these certifications. Like it seemed like I had to have all of these resources that just seemed so out of reach to me and I just wouldn't even know where to start. But then when my brother passed away, it kind of melted away all of the fluff in everything. And I just felt like I was seeing things more clearly. And I just realized that a business is just someone giving you money and you give them something that makes them feel proud that they gave you money. And so that can be as easy as you providing something and you keep track on a spreadsheet of how much that person Venmoed you, and then you give them whatever you want to give them. And so you just have to keep on working towards optimizing that. Can you increase the prices? Can you make the customer happier? What else can you give the customer in order to continue to scale up whatever you're doing? So, yeah, you just really need to align the incentives so that you are doing something that you love to do that is also making your customer really, really happy to give you money. So I think it can be as simple as, for instance, one of my good friends started his company. It was supposed to be a really complex fintech product where they were going to help you invest your assets in some kind of Web3 metaverse situation that I didn't really understand, but they were going to help you get a lot of return for the money that they were taking in. And so his initial MVP, minimum viable product, was just his friends Venmoing him $15, and he kept track on a spreadsheet of what who gave him the $15 and what he was going to do with it. And then every 2 weeks he put the amount of what that $15 investment had become, and then at the end of 6 weeks he gave the money back, and they all did have a return. And then he had a business, and it was really just a spreadsheet and some Venmos and him doing what he loves to do, which is get involved in the markets. So you can do something similar. A business doesn't have to be a really crazy, scary thing. You don't have to quit your job to start a company. You can just get started by doing a really, really small side project with it and figuring out what you want to do. But if you have an inkling to start a business, I would say just do it, because the downside of starting a business is that you learn. That's really the worst thing that can happen, is that you learn from it. And if you think about it, every single industry, if you fail, you will most likely end up in a pretty bad situation in most other industries. But in the world of starting a business, if you start a business and fail, the people that could potentially hire you will admire you for having tried to start a business, and you will probably just get a really good job that's cushy at a really big corporation. So that's the worst that can happen if you start a company and fail. So after we got our first sale, the next question is, what do you do at that point? What is the next step to getting the next sale and scaling beyond that? So I just continued making TikToks. I kept on trying to repeat what I was doing and refining what I was doing so that it would become simpler to acquire a customer and cheaper in a sense to acquire a customer. Really, the only thing that I was paying for at this point was my own time making videos, but I gradually got faster. I realized what kind of messaging was working, and I just continued to optimize the process so that we could get customers easier and faster. And then when we hit around 200 customers, I decided that it was time to raise venture capital funding. I had seen in this co founder living space that I had lived in that venture capital funding is something that really accelerated the entire process of building a business. You're able to just essentially have a playground for what you can do experiment wise. You can experiment faster at a higher velocity and arrive at conclusions faster, and then continue to scale up the business. And also, I think venture capital is just a really interesting aspect of running a business that not everyone gets to experience. And it was something that I felt like would be an interesting thing to learn about in addition to empowering my business. So at that point, I started looking into fundraising. I read a book called Fundraising by Ryan Breslow. He's a infamous controversial character, but his books are really, really good. So he has this book called Fundraising where he talks about his entire process for fundraising. It's a very quick, short read, and I would highly recommend it because I think it is one of the best go to books on how to fundraise. A lot of fundraising books just discuss the philosophy of fundraising, why it happens, and a brief introduction on how it works. But Fundraising by Ryan Breslow has really clear step by step descriptions, including sample cold messages, for instance, and really goes through the steps for what you should do. So if you follow that book to a T, which is what I did, I think you can raise at least somewhat successfully. And the rest of it is about shaping your own narrative into the frameworks that he provides. So I ended up fundraising from YC 776, which is Alexis Ohanian's fund, and also some other angels and smaller funds like Harvest Ventures, the CEO of Rose, Yi Reitano, his wife, Cleo Abrams, who's a really awesome YouTuber, and a couple of other amazing investors that were able to contribute. So I was really indexing for people that had a lot of experience creating content, building community, D2C, had a passion for women's health or health in general, and we're really able to be a part of the vision of sort of the future of medicine, because that is really what we are doing as a company. So if you also want to raise from tier 1 investors, I think that the key to raising from tier 1 investors is finding people in those funds that align with your mission. It's kind of like dating. you want to find someone that you vibe with personally and where your values align. So for me, I was really set on finding someone like Z Ratino because Ro has done a really good job with consumer health and creating content around that, creating a narrative around that. So I felt like he was a really good fit. With Alexis, he has a really famous story that's affiliated with his daughter's birth. And he was able to witness sort of the downfalls of the maternal health system. So I knew that he would be passionate about improving birth outcomes and the process of birth and optimizing that and empowering parents. He also makes a lot of personal content himself. So I felt like Alexis would be able to understand our go to market strategy. He also has a mixed race daughter, in parentheses S, because he now has two kids, but he had one when I was fundraising. And they're both mixed race. And being mixed race is a key part to our product because if you're a person of color or mixed race, it can be really difficult to find a stem cell match if you need it, which is the same issue that my family faced when my brother got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. We were trying to find a match, and it's usually really difficult, like I said, if you're a person of color or mixed race. So I felt like he could relate to that part. So I just started cold emailing people that I felt like would really align with our mission. And similar to dating, you just have to find people that have similar values to you and you feel like you would really be able to click with, that you would want their advice. So it's really just thinking in advance about who those people might be and then being able to really strictly target them and find a message that works for them. So I found a list of about maybe 7 people that I felt like would really, really align with our values. And I was really, really trying to get in touch with them. So some of them I cold emailed 10 to 15 times before I got a first response. But you just have to keep trying. Entrepreneurship is all about continuing in the face of adversity. I'm a strong believer that every single founder, even the successful ones, fail, but the ones that make it are the ones that are strong enough to continue to forge past that adversity. Y Combinator is also one of our investors, and I wanted to give a quick plug to how to get into YC. I got in as a solo female founder, and that I would say is an achievement that I'm proud of because there are very, very, very few of us. A lot of people think that YC has some sort of prejudice against solo founders. I've never personally found evidence of this, but there definitely are not that many solo female founders. So I don't necessarily think that they're prejudiced against solo founders, but in general, they're just a rarer breed. Here's how you get into YC. I got in as a solo female founder and then went on to raise a $4 million seed round. So, this is how I think you should think about YC. So, first of all, is the application. When you apply, you have to think about writing your answers very briefly and clearly. So, Paul Graham, who is one of the co founders of YC, he has an essay about how to write clearly. And really, one of the theses of that is when you write clearly, you think clearly, and vice versa. So I think that that is what a lot of partners look for when they're reading through a lot of YC apps. I personally don't know how much time they spend reading each app, but even when I get sent apps to review, I don't spend that much time reading them because I'm able to very clearly figure out what kind of writing style they're using very immediately. And if it's too verbose, if it seems unclear, then it makes me think that the founders don't really know what they're doing and they're still kind of scatterbrained about what their product is, which is not what makes a good founder. So you need to be able to think and write clearly and be able to communicate your product clearly because if you can't market it clearly, and speak about it clearly, then it will not have an effective launch. So that's the first step is writing a really clear and concise application. Then you have to submit it. And from there, you will probably get an interview. At that point, I would suggest doing mock interviews with YC alum. There's a lot of people on Twitter that start getting active around the time that YC interviews start happening. And a lot of them are offering up free help to be able to give YC interviews to people. So you can do these mock interviews. It's a good way to get practice in. You can potentially read about the questions that they ask you during a YC interview, and I would definitely prepare answers for those. But really, what you need to do these mock interviews for is to get accustomed to the cadence of the YC interviews because it's really not about the questions, it's about the cadence. Every YC interview is only 10 minutes. They ask you the questions really, really fast, and some of them won't be afraid to interrupt you, and you need to be able to move beyond that. So that's why it's important to have these mock interviews and have really clear, concise answers at the ready, but to also be prepared to be interrupted and be able to move on beyond that while still conveying a good sense of EQ and sociability and also a good relationship with your co founder. I think that That's not something that I thought a lot about because I interviewed solo, but as I've conducted mock interviews for other people that are applying to YC, something that I've noticed is a clear dynamic between the co-founders needs to be very transparent, and it needs to have a healthy presentation for how your relationship is. Yeah, so those are all of the steps of getting into YC. You do the application, and then you may be invited for an interview, and then from there you can do YC. So after I closed a $4 million seed round with Alexis Ohanian, the CEO of Row, and YC and such, I started looking into how to really just grow the business. From there, it's all about taking fundraising out of your mind and really hunkering down and going into monk mode essentially and focusing on what you can do to optimize the business, because now you have all of these resources, all of these new people that believe in you. So it's time to really show them what you've been pitching them, which is that you can continue to scale a business. So at that point, I made my first hire. It was someone that had been contracting with me for a little bit prior to my fundraise. And I was just thinking about what roles could I hire someone else to do that would be able to make the business move more efficiently, that would allow me to dedicate my resources to things that would have time better spent. So when I think about hiring, it's really thinking about you personally as the founder should optimize whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's ops or growth. And then when you've optimized that yourself and get a good foundation going, then you can hire someone and train them to continue to optimize it. And the second part of that is making sure that you have quality talent and never compromising for finding quality talent. So you want to make sure that quality talent is going to take your foundation, be able to run with it, understand it deeply, and then continue to think on their own feet and scale up that channel. So I think that hiring is a next really good step right after closing a round. But then additionally, you have to continue thinking about what else you could personally be doing next as the founder and what other areas of the business needs your attention, what needs to be fostered in order to continue to scale. And then you need to consistently revisit the long-term vision around what kind of levers you should be pulling in order to scale effectively. So yeah, as a venture-backed founder, you really need to make sure that you can hone your skills of capital allocation. So as you continue to revisit the long-term vision, you need to make sure that you're spending money fast enough that you're able to arrive at really good conclusions within the window that VCs expect you to, but also slow enough that you're not burning through money like crazy. I think the biggest challenge of running the business so far for me was learning how to be a good manager. I said only worked for 4-ish months before I started my own company, and I had only done summer internships before that, and pretty much in all of them, I had a really chill manager and not very many tasks. So I don't think I was ever managed in a high power way. And I also wasn't given high power responsibilities. And then all of a sudden, I had what felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders for my company. And I had to manage other people effectively and keep in mind their own well being, the fact that this is something that could be a part of their professional plan. And I feel really responsible for making sure that I'm able to help fulfill all of these fiduciary and emotional duties that I have to teammates that are a part of the company. So I tried to read a lot of books around management, sort of typical canonical startup literature, and more deeply understand what I can do to be an effective manager. I think the best book that I've read so far is a book called Traction that has good frameworks on how to run meetings and how to ensure that you are fulfilling these duties that you have as a manager to make sure that you're making your teammates feel fulfilled, but similarly that they're able to work efficiently. And also a metaphor that was given to me a lot early on in my founder journey was you have to make sure that everyone is rowing the boat at the same time and in the same direction, because what can easily happen at a company that's not effectively managed is people are kind of rowing in different directions and you don't really know what they should be doing next, or they don't know what they should be doing next. So you want to make sure that everybody has a really clear trajectory. And I think learning how to be a good manager was a hard part for me. Another challenge that I faced was making sure that I was untethering my company success to my own self esteem, which I think is a really difficult thing to do and something that most founders can't do. And so, yeah, I'm still working on that. And I think it's something that is important if you're going to be resilient as a founder. The future of the company is that we hope to continue to promote products that help pregnant parents feel empowered and confident throughout their birth. So, whether that's with their umbilical cord and placenta or their general health, or giving them tips that they hear through our content and through our channel, we really want to be able to support you. So, make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content, and check out our other content that is geared towards pregnant parents, entrepreneurship, and everything in between that's related to Anja Health.